Darren's plasma pistol ripped through the massive alien beast, its jaws inches from the alien girl's throat as the lifeless creature toppled off her onto the rocky ground, leaving the human and the wide-eyed Denobulan staring at each other in stunned silence amidst the sudden carnage. What started as a simple emergency landing on this uncharted planet had turned into a first-contact scenario Darren could never have anticipated. His ship damaged by an asteroid field. The human explorer had set down on this world in search of repair materials and supplies, his scanners indicating a survivable atmosphere and gravity not too dissimilar from Earth's. But instead of finding a barren wasteland, he had stumbled upon Wazin, a young Denobulan female cornered by a vicious native predator that seemed intent on making a meal of the alien girl. Despite her species being total unknowns, the human had not hesitated, drawing his sidearm and opening fire on the beast, the advanced human weaponry making short work of the creature. As Wazin slowly got to her feet, brushing dirt off her lithe, blue-skinned body, Darren sized up the peculiar alien. She was humanoid in shape, with delicate, attractive features, her eyes a luminescent shade of purple that glowed softly in the dimming light of this world's sun setting behind the trees. "Are you all right? I'm not going to hurt you," Darren said, hoping his translator was working. The Denobulan girl cocked her head, a confused look on her face before she tapped a device on her forearm. Suddenly, his words became clear to her. I am unharmed, thanks to you," Wazin replied hesitantly, eyeing the human with a mix of awe and trepidation. "But who are you? What species? I've never seen your kind before." "I'm Darren Reed, a human explorer from planet Earth. My ship was damaged in an asteroid field and I had to set down here for repairs. I was looking for resources when I heard you scream. I'm just glad I got here in time." Wazin nodded slowly, still trying to process the fact that she had just been saved by an alien. Her people, the Denobulans, were highly isolationist, viewing all outsiders with suspicion and hostility. Contact with alien species was strictly forbidden. Yet here she was, conversing with one who had just risked his life for her. As the two began to talk, a tentative rapport building, Darren quickly realized several things. He would not be able to repair his ship alone, not without components and materials from Wazin's people. And Wazin was no ordinary Denobulan. An outcast and dreamer, she longed to explore the stars, to escape the suffocating confines of her hidebound, xenophobic culture. She possessed skills and knowledge he would need. But their budding partnership would soon face grave challenges from all sides. Darren's presence had been detected by the Denobulan authorities, who viewed the human as a threat to their world that had to be captured or destroyed at all costs. Wazin was now a traitor in their eyes for daring to assist him. As they raced to repair Darren's ship while evading pursuit, the human and Denobulan found themselves drawing closer together, an undeniable attraction building. But any relationship between them was utterly forbidden, the consequences unthinkable. Darren had to repair his ship and leave the planet to warn the Alliance of a looming invasion he had uncovered. Wazin dreamt of the stars but could never abandon her people completely. Yet, as they worked frantically while the noose tightened around them, both human and alien began to wonder if some risks were worth taking, even if it meant their two worlds colliding and shattering everything they knew. The clock was ticking and the stakes could not be higher, for their lives, their civilizations, and their hearts. The sound of pursuing Denobulan soldiers echoed through the dense foliage as Darren and Wazin sprinted, hearts pounding, lungs burning. Plasma blasts sizzled past them, scorching tree trunks and setting bushes ablaze. Darren returned fire, his pistol cracking as he sent lethal bolts back at their pursuers. "In here!" Wazin shouted, diving into a narrow crevice barely visible behind a curtain of vines. Darren squeezed in after her, the damp rock scraping his skin. They plunged into darkness, the sounds of the soldiers fading behind them. The cave tunnel seemed to go on forever, twisting and turning, descending deep into the planet's crust. Strange creatures scuttled in the shadows, their eyes glinting in the beam of Darren's flashlight. Wazin navigated from memory, her voice tight with tension as she warned of unseen hazards, gaping chasms, treacherous drops, noxious gases. At last, they stumbled into a vast cavern, the walls glittering with bioluminescent fungi. In the center, illuminated by an eerie green glow, sat an ancient Denobulan spacecraft. Darren gasped. The ship was unlike anything he had seen. Sleek, angular, its hull etched with intricate hieroglyphs. "My grandfather showed me this place when I was a child," Wazin whispered, running a hand reverently over the ship's flank. "Our people used to roam the stars, before we turned inward, grew afraid." As they approached the dormant craft, figures emerged from the shadows, a ragtag group of Denobulan rebels, their faces hard and determined. A tall male with piercing eyes stepped forward. "I am Altair," he said, his voice ringing with authority. "We've been watching you, human. We saw how you saved Wezin, fought our corrupt leaders. We share a common dream, a future where our kinds can coexist in peace. Help us, and we'll help you." Together, they worked feverishly to salvage parts from the ancient ship, Darren marveling at the rebels' knowledge of the archaic systems. As they labored, he and Altair talked, sharing stories of their worlds, their hopes. Altair spoke passionately of his vision for a reformed Denobulan society, one open to the wonders of the universe. In turn, Darren described Earth's checkered history, the hard lessons learned about the perils of xenophobia and isolationism. Suddenly, the cavern shook with a tremendous blast. Commander Rigel burst in, his elite soldiers pouring in behind him, weapons crackling with deadly energy. Darren and the rebels leapt to defend themselves, plasma bolts crisscrossing the cavern in a lethal light show. Darren and Altair fought back to back, human pistol and Denobulan rifle flashing as one. Wezin danced through the battle, her lithe form a blur as she engaged Rigel's soldiers hand to hand with devastating skill. But the Denobulan commander was ruthless, driving his troops forward with fanatical intensity. In a heart-stopping instant, Darren saw a soldier line up a shot at Wezin's unprotected back. Without hesitation, he leapt, knocking her aside just as the plasma bolt seared through the space she'd occupied a millisecond before. They tumbled to the ground, Wezin gasping in pain. A livid burn seared across her shoulder where the shot had grazed her. With a final, desperate push, the rebels drove back Rigel's forces, buying a momentary reprieve. Altair pulled Darren and Wezin to their feet, pressing salvaged components into their hands. "Go now," the rebel leader urged. "Get to your ship. We'll draw them off, buy you time to escape." Darren clasped arms with Altair, emotion burning in his eyes. "I'll come back for you," the human vowed. "I swear it. Your fight is my fight now." Then he and Wezin were running, scrambling through the labyrinthine caves, clawing their way back to the surface. In the distance, they could hear the sounds of ferocious combat as Altair and his rebels hurled themselves at the Denobulan pursuit with reckless abandon. Hearts pounding, they raced through the forest, darting around massive tree trunks, leaping over gnarled roots. Wezin gritted her teeth against the pain of her wound, her face pale but determined. Darren gripped her hand, pulling her onward, his touch a lifeline and a promise. At last, they broke through the tree line and skidded to a halt, shock and despair washing over them. Commander Rigel stood waiting, his elite soldiers arrayed behind him, weapons leveled at the human and the renegade Denobulan. The commander's face twisted in a triumphant sneer. "Did you really think you could escape me?" Rigel hissed, his voice dripping with contempt. "You've led me on a merry chase, human. But your pathetic collusion ends here, and you, traitor," he rounded on Wezin, eyes blazing with zealous hatred. "You will pay the ultimate price for betraying your people." Darren stepped forward, shielding Wezin with his body, his pistol held rock steady in a two-handed grip as he stared down the Denobulan commander. "We've only just begun, Rigel." The human's voice rang with iron conviction. "You can't stop what's coming. Your reign of xenophobia and oppression is ending, one way or another." His finger tightened on the trigger as Wezin raised her own appropriated Denobulan weapon. The future of two peoples hung in the balance as human and Denobulan, rebel and tyrant, faced off under the alien stars, the very destiny of their worlds to be decided in the next fateful moments. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air as Darren and Weezin dove for cover behind a fallen tree trunk. The acrid smell of scorched bark filled their nostrils as they returned fire, Darren's advanced plasma pistol cutting through the Denobulan soldier's armor with precision. 3 o'clock, Weezin shouted, her keen eyes spotting movement in the dense foliage. Darren swung his weapon around, squeezing off 2 quick shots. A pained cry confirmed the hit. Nice catch, he panted, flashing her a quick grin. They fought in perfect sync, Weezin's intimate knowledge of Denobulan tactics, allowing them to anticipate and counter each move. They're trying to flank us, she warned, gesturing to their left. As they repositioned, a barrage of fire separated them. Darren found himself pinned down behind a boulder, Commander Rigel and 2 lieutenants closing in. Surrender, human, Rigel sneered, weapon trained on Darren's head. Time slowed. Darren saw Rigel's finger tightening on the trigger. Suddenly, a blue blur slammed into the commander. Weezin. Seizing the moment, Darren lunged forward, tackling one lieutenant while kicking the weapon from the other's hands. He grappled with Rigel, the two locked in a brutal struggle. Darren's combat training gave him the edge, allowing him to slowly gain the upper hand. Just as Darren was about to subdue Rigel, a flash of metal caught his eye. Weezin, look out! He yelled. Too late. Rigel's hidden blade plunged into Weezin's side. She crumpled to the ground, blue blood staining her clothing. No! Darren roared. With a surge of adrenaline, he wrenched the blade from Rigel's grasp and knocked him unconscious with a vicious blow. Darren rushed to Weezin, cradling her in his arms. Her breathing was shallow, skin pale. Stay with me, he pleaded, tearing strips from his shirt to staunch the bleeding. Hefting Weezin onto his shoulders, Darren sprinted towards his crashed ship. Plasma bolts whizzed past as he zigzagged through the trees, every step jostling Weezin's wound. Finally reaching the ship, Darren laid Weezin down gently. His hands flew over the controls, cobbling together repairs to the medical bay. Come on, he muttered, willing the systems to life. The healing chamber hummed to life just as another wave of Denobulan soldiers burst from the tree line. Darren sealed Weezin inside, then raced to the weapons controls. The ship's defensive systems roared to life, forcing the attackers back. With a final desperate prayer, Darren fired up the engines. The ship shuddered, then lifted off, streaking into the sky as the last of Rigel's forces fell away. In the cold silence of space, Darren plotted a course for the nearest human outpost, his eyes constantly flicking to Weezin's vital signs. Hours stretched into days as they hurtled through the void. During rare moments of consciousness, Weezin's luminous purple eyes found Darren's. Thank you, she whispered once, her hand weakly grasping his. For showing me the stars. Darren's throat tightened. We'll see them together, I promise. As they approached the outpost, a stern voice crackled over the comm. Unidentified vessel, state your purpose. This is Darren Reed, he responded, voice raw with exhaustion. I have a critically wounded alien aboard. She saved my life. Please, help us. Silence stretched for agonizing seconds before the voice returned. Proceed to docking bay 3. Medical team standing by. Darren sagged with relief, guiding the ship in. He gazed at Weezin's pale form in the healing chamber, hope kindling in his chest. Their journey wasn't over yet. The docking bay doors slid open with a hiss as Darren's battered ship touched down. Medical personnel swarmed the vessel before the engines fully powered down. Darren stumbled out, cradling Weezin's limp form in his arms. She needs help now, he shouted, his voice raw with desperation. A team of doctors in crisp white uniforms rushed forward with a hovering stretcher. Darren gently laid Weezin down, her skin ashen and clammy. The lead physician, a stern-faced woman with close-cropped gray hair, scanned Weezin with a handheld device. Severe internal trauma, unknown toxin present, she barked. Get her to the xenobiology ward, stat. Darren jogged alongside the stretcher as they raced through sterile corridors. The outpost's advanced medical bay was a whirlwind of activity. Holographic displays flickered with alien anatomies. Robotic arms prepped surgical tools. "Sir, you need to wait outside," a nurse said firmly, blocking Darren's path as they wheeled Weezin into surgery. For hours, Darren paced the waiting area, fists clenched. Through the observation window, he caught glimpses of the doctors' grim faces as they worked. Finally, the lead physician emerged, her expression grave. "We've stabilized her, but—" "But what?" Darren demanded. "Her physiology is unlike anything we've seen. The wound is infected with a toxin our treatments can't neutralize. Her body is rejecting our medications." Darren's stomach dropped. "There has to be something you can do." The doctor shook her head. "We need help from someone who understands denobulin biology. Do you have any contacts?" Darren's mind raced. "Altair," he said. "The rebel leader, he might know." Within hours, Altair arrived with a group of denobulin medics. They carried satchels filled with strange herbs and vials of shimmering liquids. "We brought everything we could," Altair said, clasping Darren's shoulder. "Let's hope it's enough." For days, the human and denobulin medical teams worked in tandem, ancient remedies mixed with cutting-edge technology as they fought to save Wezin's life. Darren watched anxiously as color slowly returned to Wezin's cheeks. Her breathing grew stronger, vitals stabilized. Hope bloomed in his chest. But then Altair pulled him aside, face grim. "Darren, there's something you need to know." The rebel leader's words hit like a physical blow. The toxin had ravaged Wezin's body. Even if she survived, she might never fully recover. Worst of all, she would likely be unable to bear children, a cruel fate for a denobulin female. Darren confronted Altair, voice cracking. "There has to be another way. You can't tell me this is it." Altair's eyes flickered. "There is one last option, but the cost—" He spoke of an ancient ritual, a spiritual journey into the realm of denobulin ancestors. It could heal Wezin completely, but the dangers were immense. She might lose her connection to her people forever. Darren didn't hesitate. "Do it, whatever it takes." The preparations began immediately. Altair and the rebel elders gathered around Wezin's bed, chanting in a lilting language as they burned strange incense. Darren held Wezin's hand as her eyes fluttered closed, her consciousness slipping away to another plane of existence. What followed were the longest weeks of Darren's life. He watched helplessly as Wezin's body convulsed, fighting battles he couldn't see. Her life force ebbed, vitals dropping dangerously low. In his darkest moments, Darren saw visions of Wezin. She pleaded with him to let her go, to end her suffering, but he refused to give up. Day after day, he sat by her bedside. He recounted their adventures, described the wonders waiting for them among the stars. His voice grew hoarse, but he kept talking, willing her to hear him. "Come back to me," he whispered. "We have so much left to see together." Then, after an eternity of waiting, Wezin's eyes snapped open. They shone with an otherworldly light, filled with ancient wisdom and newfound strength. "Darren," she breathed, reaching for him. They embraced, tears flowing freely. Altair and the others looked on in awe, witnessing the power of a bond that transcended species. But their joy was short-lived. An urgent message crackled over the outpost's comm system. "Multiple denobulin warships detected on long-range scanners," a tense voice announced. "They're on an intercept course. ETA. 6 hours." Darren's blood ran cold as he locked eyes with Altair. They both knew who was leading that fleet. Commander Rigel was coming, and he wouldn't stop until he had Wezin, and destroyed every human who stood in his way. The battle for two worlds was about to begin. The human outpost buzzed with frantic activity. Technicians rushed to fortify defenses, while soldiers checked and rechecked their weapons. In the command center, Darren, Wezin, and Altair huddled over a holographic display of the approaching denobulin fleet. "We're outnumbered and outgunned," Altair said, his voice tight. "Our defenses won't hold against a full assault." Darren's eyes narrowed as he studied the enemy formation. "Then we don't let them get that far." He tapped the largest ship at the center of the fleet. "We take out their flagship first. cripple their leadership and weapons, and the rest might fall apart. Wiesen leaned in, her face pale but determined. I know every inch of those ships. I can guide us to the reactor core. Darren turned to her, concern etched on his face. You're still recovering. This mission will be dangerous. I'm going, Wiesen said firmly, her eyes blazing with dedication. You need me. Darren nodded reluctantly, then outlined his plan. They would use a small, stealthy craft to slip past the denobulan sensors and dock with the flagship. Once inside, they'd fight their way to the reactor core and plant explosives to disable the ship's main weapons. As the denobulan fleet loomed closer, Darren, Wiesen, Altair, and 3 of Altair's most trusted fighters boarded their craft. The ship's stealth systems engaged, rendering them nearly invisible as they approached the massive denobulan flagship. They docked silently, using a little-known maintenance hatch Wiesen had identified. The team moved swiftly through dimly lit corridors, their footsteps muffled by the constant hum of the ship's engines. Suddenly, voices echoed from around a corner. Darren signaled the team to halt, pressing himself against the wall. 2 denobulan guards rounded the bend, engrossed in conversation. In a blur of motion, Altair and one of his fighters subdued them silently. This way, Wiesen whispered, leading them deeper into the ship's bowels. They encountered sporadic resistance, each firefight brief but intense. Plasma bolts sizzled past Darren's head as he returned fire, downing a denobulan soldier with a well-placed shot. Wiesen moved with surprising agility, her recent ordeal seemingly forgotten as she fought alongside him. At last, they reached the reactor core, a cavernous chamber dominated by a pulsing column of energy. Wiesen quickly identified the key systems, and the team set to work planting explosive charges. Almost done, Darren said, attaching the final device. A slow clap echoed through the chamber. Impressive. Commander Rigel's voice dripped with contempt as he stepped into view, flanked by a squad of elite guards. But futile. Darren's hand inched towards his weapon, but Rigel was faster. A plasma bolt struck Darren's shoulder, sending him sprawling. The room erupted into chaos as both sides opened fire. Darren struggled to his feet, ignoring the searing pain in his shoulder. He saw Rigel advancing on him, eyes blazing with hatred. They clashed in a brutal hand-to-hand struggle, Rigel's fury giving him a deadly edge. A vicious blow sent Darren reeling. Through blurred vision, he saw Wiesen at the reactor controls, her fingers flying over the panel. Rigel noticed too, turning towards her with murderous intent. Wiesen, no! Darren cried out, realizing her plan. She met his gaze, her eyes filled with love and sorrow. I'm sorry, she said softly, then slammed her hand down on the detonator. The bulkhead slammed shut, sealing Wiesen and Rigel in the reactor chamber. Through the viewport, Darren watched helplessly as energy arced wildly from the destabilizing core, engulfing both figures. We have to go! Altair shouted, dragging Darren away. Tears streamed down Darren's face as they raced back to their ship. Behind them, the denobulan flagship listed aimlessly, its weapon systems crippled by Wiesen's sacrifice.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.